During this season of Lent, week by week, we're going to take an opportunity to hear from staff members and from other members of the parish who are reflecting on the upcoming gospel. We're calling this Weekly Word, and we hope that it can be a part of your Lenten practice this year. We want to encourage folks to spend time with the upcoming scripture. You don't need to be experts, I think we'll demonstrate that, but more just be led by the Spirit to wonder about what word God has for us in the coming Sunday. This Sunday, coming up, the first Sunday in Lent, we'll be hearing of the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness where he was tempted with Satan. And this morning, Bob Hetherington and Amelia McDaniel and I are just going to reflect on this scripture for just a bit. I think the thing that occurred to me, first of all, was that it reminded me of the time of Israel in the wilderness, after they had been led by Moses out of Egypt and spent 40 years in the wilderness being tempted and being tested. This scripture ends with that when this testing of Jesus was over, that the devil departed for a more opportune time. The word tested in Hebrew has this sense that the way that God tests us is to push up against us, not to knock us down, but so that we can learn about our own sort of strength to stand up. So those were my first thoughts in encountering this gospel.
Well, Jesus certainly was confronted with choices about how he was going to live out this ministry that he was chosen for in his baptism. And they're hard choices. He had 3 opportunities that all sounded pretty good. And of course, they're in the context of temptations and the work of the devil, and he chose a different path. But every day we got to make choices about what we're going to do, how we're going to use our gifts, where we're going to go. And it's a challenge. A lot of temptation out there.
Mm.
I was struck by how, I don't know that he was comfortable, but he seemed to be able to settle into being uncomfortable here. That Jesus handled these temptations in a way that profoundly rooted himself in God's love. The pushing, he was not going to be pushed over, but that how hard it is to be uncomfortable, this kind of profoundly uncomfortable, how you want those easy outs sound pretty darn good.
Well, being in the wilderness, when you got to be in terms of being struggling, hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Great, let's make some bread. How he ever had the strength to resist that is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
What I find really interesting in all the accounts of this is that it actually was the work of the Spirit. In Mark's version, it sounds like the Spirit took Jesus by the scruff of the neck and threw him into the wilderness. It's not quite like that in Luke, but that this is part of the work of the Spirit, is to lead him, to lead us into those places where we come to rely on God alone.
One of the things that makes it particularly hard is the devil can quote scripture too. The devil's going to get us. Woo! Careful.
There's this great Brene Brown quote about choosing courage over comfort, and how choosing what's right is so much harder than what's fast, cheap, and easy. Something to that effect.
Amen.
And that it's the practice of making the choices that actually lead you into a life of integrity. But that idea of these difficult, uncomfortable places where we get put into all the time.
Mm-hmm. in making these choices about this is what my vocation, he's saying no to these no to power, no to shortcuts, and then goes on, if we're not supposed to go that way, if we're not supposed to overpower or coerce or sort of manipulate, then how are we to live? And which is what the gospel then goes on to show us. Here's what sacrificial love looks like. Because I think, in my mind, I immediately go, okay, the options that we have open to us are, power to effect change. But Jesus says, no, not that way, not that way. A different kind of power.
One of the ways of thinking about temptation is we set up all these straw men, which aren't really good choices. The point of this is that these are really good choices. Power, as I was subject to abuse, but to have the power to create a world where there's peace and blessing, that had to be a heck of a temptation for Jesus.
To end hunger, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah.